I will start though. I want to take a poll of the room. Hi, Eric Lloyd at Roku. Just who here does not have a cable subscription? Either you are a cord never or a cord cutter. Who here does not have cable? All right, that's pretty representative, I think, of the general stat here. So Google released their CTV report about a month or two ago. 40% of all U.S. households are not reachable within linear. And the assumption has always been, well, that's a lot of the younger audiences, the cord nevers, but the growth is actually now coming from, and we did not call them silver streamers, so I'm not taking credit for that either, but from the older audiences. And that's what we're here to really talk about, knowing that this is where a lot of the disease states that we want to help and treat and target are only available within streaming, or if they are in streaming and linear, they're spending a bulk of their time actually still streaming. And so this is a great opportunity, and we're really excited to share some of the results with you. So just some of the high-level data points before I hand it over to John is that if you look at the overall piece of the pie here, it's kind of hard to tell with the keys. The 55 plus there is at 23%. So the older audiences there are starting to take a bigger piece of the overall CTV time spent. And the one great thing about Roku, we are the streaming platform. We have devices and televisions. People buy our devices exclusively to stream. We're looking at our audiences in the 50 plus, and that's the next slide there, John, and seeing that 55% of them are cord cutters. So they're not actually using any linear at all. They're just using streaming subscription services. And of the 45% that do both, again, like I said before, they're spending the majority of their time using the streaming apps. And that's going to continue to grow. It started growing out of the pandemic, and now we're seeing it, seeing these audiences exhibit the same behavior as some of the younger audiences. They're downloading more apps, spending more time within streaming, and ultimately are removing themselves from broadcast when their contracts come up. So don't take it from me. I'm going to hand it over to John she stole my joke that you were a silver streamer, but take it from John.
So the funny thing is, as we were putting this all together, I heard silver streamer earlier. They come from our shop here, and it wasn't until like this week I'm like, Mike, so remind me, what's the cutoff age? He's like 50 plus. Yeah. Oh no, that's me. Like they were supposed to be older, so she's right. You don't really notice that you've become older until you actually are, and you still think you're young, which hopefully we can live that way. But this younger generation is so good at introducing us, so thank you. You guys are great. So a little bit our research. We surveyed over 3,000 people, all demographics, so that we can compare against the 50 plus. We made sure to sample on the 50 plus so we can dig deeper into what their views are and how they are using CTV and ultimately how they're looking at pharma. This is the third year that we've done this, as they said earlier, really moving into, we focused in CTV before. Now we're focusing very specifically in the 50 plus CTV because it's so important, and hopefully these numbers will help you see that. So when we look at the research, we're looking at the TV viewing habits of those 50 plus. We're looking at how they have relationships with pharma brands and specifically how they react to pharma ads. And then finally trying to uncover the value or quantify the value that those 50 plus provide to pharma as it pertains to CTV. So some stats on silver streamers. Now, we've heard this a few times today, 79% streamed in our research. 21% are exclusively streaming, different from Roku only because we're looking at the total pop. So it's just a different population set. The rest tend to have cable and satellite TV. So they are both sometimes on linear TV as well as CTV. Now, what's interesting is 52% are streaming more. Now, the one thing about CTV, if you think about 2020, we started to do a lot of new things. Right? We cooked sourdough at home. That was great. We used Zoom for everything, including keeping in touch with family and friends and work. And we started to stream a lot more than we did before. And so now, just last week, the CDC said that it's no longer a pandemic or no longer a health emergency, COVID, which is fantastic. We're all very excited. And life is not getting back to normal, it's getting back to the new normal. And so we're not eating as much sourdough, which is fantastic. Probably no one's doing that anymore. Unfortunately, Zoom is still more than it was before, but we're not actually having to do it with our family. So kind of like 50-50, that's good. Maybe we could do a little less at work too. But when you look at CTV, people are streaming more than they did. So those 50 plus are streaming more than they did last year. So, you know, it's not a pandemic phenomenon. It is literally a function of that helped kind of turbocharge the movement that was going to happen anyways. The industry moving from a world of linear TV to a world of streaming TV. And this, I highly expect to see to keep growing because, you know, until you reach 100%, and we will reach 100% at some point, this is going to keep growing. So lastly, we looked at the apps that everyone's using, and what we found was whether you're 50 plus, the silver streamers, or I don't know, the youth streamers, the very young streamers that are just a few years younger than me, very few, they are looking at the same apps and subscribing and using the same number of apps. So their interaction with streaming is not that dramatically different and with the apps that they're using. And these are their apps that are most commonly used. They're the ones that you would see in any list: Netflix, Prime, Hulu, Peacock, Paramount, and Roku. So definitely, in many ways, not different than your streaming under 50s, but in some important ways they are, and we'll get into them.
Yeah, so while we know all age groups love streaming, there's some generational gaps we found. So we're looking at what types of streaming services people prefer by age group. We found that adult 50 plus audiences tend to prefer ad-supported, cheaper streaming services, such as the Roku channel, Freevee, Tubi, compared to the more expensive ad-free services like Netflix or HBO Max. This is great news for pharma advertisers for two main reasons. First is that it's easier to get in front of this audience because they're watching advertising on streaming. And the second reason is that this means that this generation is just generally more amenable to advertising. And our hypothesis is that this is a generation that grew up watching TV with the advertising. So this is part of the advertising TV viewing experience. And because AVOD tends to have less ad load compared to the linear TV, we're providing a better TV viewing experience to adult 50 plus generation. And another differentiator for this generation is that they're most likely to consume both CTV and cable at the same time, but CTV is growing far faster. So if you look at this pie chart over here, the largest chunk in green is adult 50 viewers who watch both streaming services and cable. So this is a hybrid audience. And then the next largest slice of the pie is streaming only audiences. So this is a cord cutter. And then the next slice is people who only watch linear TV. So to me, it's really exciting to see that streaming only audiences are now bigger than cable only audience among adult 50 plus. And it's worth noting that this breakout is a little bit different from what you see from Eric's slide earlier. If you zoom in from here among Roku audiences only, the cord cutting pie will be larger at 55%. Now, I want to think a little bit more about this hybrid audience.
Sorry.
Because what does it actually mean to, if we go back, oh, perfect.
Sorry.
No worries.
Do you want me to be there, or?
No, I want to stay at the pie
sorry about
chart.
that.
Yeah.
This is tricky.
No worries. So what does it actually mean to have both cable subscription and streaming TV? Does it mean everybody's like always watching linear TV or the other way around? To me, I think having cable TV subscription is similar to gym membership. I don't know about everybody else, but I have a gym membership. Doesn't mean I'm there 7 days a week. I'm there like once or twice a week. So we wanted to know how people are actually using their cable services and streaming TVs on their TV screen. So we asked our respondents whether their TV consumption has increased or decreased compared to the last year. And when we look at the bar graph on the right, the orange represents streaming, blue represents cable TV, and more than half of the audience answer that their streaming hour has increased compared to the last year, while only 30% reported so for cable. And when it comes to decreased use of TV, only 5% reported so for streaming, and 15% reported so for cable. So there's a very clear shift in viewership from cable to streaming TV. So in order to reach this audience and really maximize your reach across both CTV and linear, advertisers now need to cast a wider net in the sea of TV. And there has been a little bit of myth among our advertisers that, oh, what if we shift our linear budget from linear to CTV? Are we going to lose our total scale? And that is not the case, and we wanted to quantify that. So we ran an analysis for all of the pharma advertising that ran on Roku in 1/4 of last year, and also compare that to a linear campaign among the same advertisers, because Roku has ACR data, so we have visibility into both Roku advertising activity as well as linear. What we found is that 92% of the total audience reached on Roku was completely exclusive to Roku. So in other words, these are the audiences that cannot be reached at all on linear. And to put this in context, when we compare this 92% stat to linear, so this includes all the top broadcast networks and cable networks, and this exclusivity rate is only from 1 to 2%. So think about a buy where you buy 20 different cable networks that over-index for adult 50 plus, and say I'm an adult 50 plus audience. I'm sitting in my living room watching these ads, and I love to watch all of these 20 different networks. So I'm being hit by the same ad over and over again with a really high frequency. And when you buy your media with CTV or Roku, you won't have this problem because you will be reaching a highly exclusive audience. So on top of your really big linear reach, you will be able to add net new audiences that cannot be found on linear at all.
And so oftentimes what we see, stats are quoting around 60% of the population is reachable via linear TV and about 60% via CTV. So you're never going to reach 100% by doing just one. And so one of our clients came to us, and this is for a lung cancer brand last year. And what we did is we did a campaign for them where we specifically looked at linear TV exposure and created a plan so that we would find incremental condition sufferers. So these are condition sufferers reached via the linear TV campaign and the CTV campaign. And what we did through a lot of hands-on management and some planning, we're able to find 96% incremental reach specifically for through CTV of people who are not being reached through linear TV. And we can measure that because we use ACR data that we get from LG. Now, this is in and of itself great, right? Only 4% kind of wasted, if you will, where there's crossover. But, you know, we always talk about impressions and everything else, but we're talking about lives here. This is lung cancer. Lung cancer moves fast. People need to see treatment fast. And if a large portion, say 40% of the population, is not even watching where a lung treatment is advertising, they're not going to have the same opportunity as those who are watching through linear TV. So it's really important as marketers, you know, to put the human element to it. These are 37,000 people who may or may not have, you know, gotten the kind of treatment, you know, understood what they needed to do, you know, had other options presented to them. So it's really important in terms of, you know, we all do health. And with health, it is bigger than just, you know, selling something. It's really getting someone to seek treatment. And this is an example of how CTV can do that and do that effectively. So I think we all know this, right? People 50 plus tend to have more conditions. 77% of patients over 50 have diagnosed conditions. And of course, like the most common ones are everything you'd expect, right? High cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, but there's a whole lot of other conditions that are unique to individuals, often called rare conditions, that, you know, fundamentally are just as much of a concern, but they're harder to reach people because there's so few of them. So CTV gives you the opportunity to then target those using advanced modeling, not health data, but you know, HIPAA compliant modeling that gets you to those individuals for those conditions that, you know, aren't making the top 10 list, but are equally as life-changing and challenging. And then, you know, this is always a scary stat, and I'm not far from this number of 3 prescriptions. but people tend to take, of the people we researched in this study, we saw that they were taking more than 3 medications, at the time of when they filled out the form. So that is a big piece of why this is important, because these are the people that we in pharma need to reach.
So because adult 50+ audience tend to have health conditions and they also love CTV, so you would think that pharma advertisers are engaging with this audience on CTV, but in reality, we're not there yet. In a separate study Roku conducted in partnership with Lucid last year, we wanted to understand the brand awareness for top pharma brands among CTV cord-cutting audiences versus cable subscribers. And our hypothesis was that because traditionally a lot of the pharma budget is allocated on linear, there will be some knowledge gap in terms of cord cutters. They will be less familiar with all these brands. And when we surveyed, we also had a qualifier question because we wanted to ask this question to in-category audience only. So you had to be either someone who's treating for this condition or a caretaker of someone who's treating for this condition. And what we found is that cord-cutting audiences that are in this category are 35% less familiar with the top pharmaceutical brands compared to the cable subscribers. 35%. Even though this aligned with our hypothesis, we were really surprised to see such significant number because the only difference between these two groups are whether they subscribe to cable TV or not. So it's clear that pharma advertisers are not reaching the cord-cutting audiences. And just like John said, if you don't reach your target audience for pharma advertising, there are actual health outcomes. So in the next few years, it's really our goal to close this gap and help our pharma advertisers to reach these cord-cutting audiences, drive brand awareness, drive RX lift, but ultimately help people with these conditions seek for a right treatment and pursue an improved quality of life. Another important factor in reaching the right audience is also with relevant messaging and relevant targeting. So we asked our respondents how they're feeling about the pharma ads they're getting right now. Does it feel relevant to them or not? And when you see the orange bars, which represents adults over 50, 40% of them think their advertising they're getting are not relevant to them, which is almost twice as high compared to how people under 50 are feeling. So there's a clear gap here, and DeepIntent and Roku can help you find the solution for that.
So, and why is that? Probably everyone in this room kind of knows it, but, it's obvious when you see it in writing, right? Linear TV, you just have a few things that you can target against: geography and age and gender. When you look at CTV, it's one-to-one targeting. Fundamentally, we target on an individual basis. And so that gives us the ability, and these are stats specifically for HCP, then I'll go into DTC in a second. You can target based off of the specialty of a doctor, based off of the procedures that they're writing for their patients, or the conditions they're diagnosing, or the scripts that they're writing. And of course, in pharma, we have a lot of clients who are creating their own target lists, and certainly they're targetable at the MPI level. So, the degree of targetability in CTV is amazing. One way I describe it when I'm talking to people not in the industry is that you and your neighbor could be watching the exact same show, but get a relevant ad for each view, which is very different at the exact same time. Which, who doesn't, if you have to see an ad, don't you want it to be something that's relevant to you, right? It's just logical. Now, on the DTC side, the same thing is possible, but of course, we don't use health information to target, right? That's illegal. It's just also immoral, right? And we're not going to do that. But we have the ability to target based off of other things, such as models that we build that help increase the propensity for us to be able to reach the individuals. So if you think of how you might target linear TV, and if 1% of the population has the condition, if you target it right, you maybe can do 1%, maybe a little more for linear TV, and just do a little better than the baseline population. Through our models, it gives us the ability to manage a campaign better, to where we could see 4 times, 7 times, sometimes 10 times better targetability. That doesn't mean that we know these individuals have the condition, but I use a terrible example, but I will use it. I'm from Miami. I'm a redhead. If you want to target someone for a skin cancer, you probably want to look at Miami redheads, right? It's just, It's logical, right? Our models basically do that, but we do that using 4,000 attributes versus just that. So a lot that you could do there to specifically increase your performance. And Chris had shown a version of this stat before, but in working with Roku, when we add in DeepIntent as the operating system, we quadruple the ability to ultimately reach the right patient using our models as kind of like the power for that targeting.
Hey. So one of the things that we've heard a lot about today is around fragmentation and how CTV can be such a confusing marketplace. But at the end of the day, it boils down to building this one-to-one connection with your potential patients, your potential customers. And a lot of the pitfalls that you might see in the media, in the industry about, oh, it's hard, we're back where we were with television, with streaming, because there's so many different content options. That completely ignores the underlying data infrastructure that has been built over the past few years. And exactly why we partner with the DeepIntent, who does this so well, is to be able to find those streamers at scale. Like we hear a lot about wanting to buy March Madness, wanting to buy Grammys, wanting to buy Oscars. With these modeled audiences, you're cutting down a very large piece of the pie to an audience size that is more relevant, but also scaling at some of the levels of these blockbuster tentpoles that you might have in broadcast. And so that's kind of a little bit of the opportunity of closing those gaps that Sue is talking about. But we also know that the advertising becomes much more personal and relevant. And we polled our users on what they want from pharma brands, and they're okay with seeing pharma ads. 8 out of 10 are saying that if they see a pharma ad, they're going to take an action. They're going to go talk to their doctor. They're going to research the drug. They're going to talk to their friends or family. So it's vitally important. I think the biggest complaint about advertising is usually that the advertising is not relevant enough. And so if you end up buying streaming like you buy broadcast, you're going to find the same issues that you have with fragmentation that way, and you're going to have the same complaints from the streamers that you're not getting relevant ads. However, if we take full advantage of the tech stack that's in front of us and be able to drive measurable outcomes, we're going to deliver relevant ads, which is exactly what the adults 50 plus want to see. So that's a big opportunity, and we're extremely excited about these results to actually push your business forward.
And so I'm going to go back a few slides here because Sue had a great slide that helps for this next slide. When you look at the slide, it's a fascinating slide. There was ample sample, like this is a legit thing, but it's funny how you see under 50 has 40% in excellent good, and then it just kind of has the converse with over 50, right? And fundamentally, right, 40% of people under 50 are saying that ads are relevant, whereas over 50, 40% are saying that they are not relevant. So if you look at when we specifically ask them the impact of the ad on what they did to take action from it, what we find is that 21% of patients under 50 have made an appointment with an HCP healthcare provider after seeing an ad. And 42% had a conversation with their HCP. And in pharma marketing, especially obviously DTC pharma marketing, that's what you want. You want as much of this as you can get. You want to influence people to talk to their doctor and to go to their doctor, ultimately talk to their doctor. And hopefully the doctor can find the right treatment. And if the treatment is what you're advertising, that's great. If there are other treatments, that's still a win. When you look at folks over 50, you see something very different. Only 7% say that they have been influenced to make an appointment based off of the ads they see. And only 9% have had a discussion with their HCPs. Okay. Nobody move. All right, I think we're good. I don't know what that was, but we're good. All right, and only 29% have ultimately had that discussion. So, this ties directly into ad relevance, right? If the ads aren't relevant, they're not going to influence you. And, whether it's for pharma or anything else, right? You have to have a relevant ad. It has to make sense to you, and that's going to drive the action. And, in our world, the action is really important. And, one of the things that we see a lot of, we've done a lot of analyses where we look at integrated campaigns. So, it's easy to comprehend that if you market to patients and they go to a doctor and talk about their condition, that they're going to get on script. We also have HCP campaigns, right, where we're targeting HCPs, and yes, we're targeting physicians through CTV and seeing impact in terms of incremental script, that they're going to be more aware of the condition and they're going to take action in how they treat their patients. But what we're also able to do with the data that we have is look at those patients who have been exposed to a campaign and go to a doctor who also has been exposed to a campaign for the same brand at the HCP level. And typically we see about a 30% lift compared to those patients who just saw the ad and went, to a doctor who wasn't exposed. So these all work together, and that's really important because what we find with streamers is that over 2/3 of people 50 and over are looking to their doctors for advice, specifically on their treatments, their conditions, and ultimately the brands they get on. So it's important that that conversation is had. We know that doctors are the ones who write the prescription, but they rely on it more than any other generation in our research, which kind of aligns with the fact that both sides have to ultimately be talking to the HCP as well as the DTC to see the impact that we're looking for. And that's it. We'll open this up for questions. We're excited, and we know that we're the three things between you and happy hour. So we're ready.
We'll also be at happy hour if you want to ask us questions there.
That's true.
We'll take them here too.
I'm gonna go to bed because it's not too late. I gotta get home. I got my show, my happy hour dinner's got my early bird dinner is gonna happen. So questions, anyone? Oh. None at all. Yeah, bye.
So you're saying ad relevance for 50 plus is really low.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the economy and having the HCP and consumer sort of working together. But then what's the solution for that ad relevance? How do we make that relevant? Is it really a messaging creative? And is there a way that you guys are able to tap into whatever that patient journey is to then sort of that message? So how do we look at that?
I think the biggest piece is there's a portion of silver streamers who are seeing the ads that are on linear TV. They aren't as relevant, while they are not seeing the ads on CTV. And CTV can be targeted in a much more relevant way. So, ads are pretty relevant, and, Med Legal Review makes sure they're relevant in ways that are interesting, right? But ultimately, it's getting it to the right patient, which is probably the hardest part, and would be the piece that would get it to that level of relevance that would then increase their reaction to it.
Yeah, and part of that too is that we focus so much on audiences and streaming versus content, in that a lot of times when you're buying TV, you're trying to buy demos that you're told are watching certain shows, whereas we know that there's not a one size fits all for those audiences. So there's in CTV, you could have a 50 plus audience watching a show that you think is actually for 20 to 30-year-olds, and you're able to deliver the ad and the message to them. So it's more about that audience versus the show to build that relevance out.
There's another question straight back.
So I can answer this. So you're right. Like Netflix used to encourage password sharing. They have now are trying to crack down on that because they have around, I think there's 250 million active accounts, and there's 100 million people accessing those Netflix accounts that aren't associated to those accounts. We say it's all about where you start with the data. Like we run it from a platform, and DeepIntent partners with us. So we're at the device level is where we're looking at everything. So if it's your device, but it's somebody else's account, we know it's you on that device. So you're more likely to get the relevant ad. But it's a big part of the buying like broadcast. If you buy some of the individual apps standalone, you don't know who you're getting. Your audience quality is going to be lower than you think it is because you're actually not reaching somebody in that patient population set. Yep.
Yes.
You mentioned, I believe, earlier that even though there's a high number of 50 plus people consuming CTV, the pharma brands are still a bit reluctant to spend money there. Is that you say that?
Definitely their focus is on linear TV. There's a transition to CTV, but it's probably just at the beginning of that transition.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? I mean, the numbers show that, and they have so much money to spend. Why are they so reluctant to spend for it?
I think it's fundamentally change is hard for every industry. So not knocking pharma or any other industry. And when you look at linear TV is some of us my age may remember a time when there wasn't pharma ads, right? That's really a product of like the mid 90s. and it worked. And that was all, linear TV, right? So TV has always been kind of like the focus, what got pharma where they are. I've been in the pharma analytics world for about 15 years, and 15 years ago, we were trying to convince people just to do something digitally, right? Digital is a thing that will work and will drive scripts, right? Now we all know that that's the case, and that we don't have to have a discussion, but that's where CTV is now. But linear, is still the lion's share of the budgets, and the way linear is bought is at the GRP level. So I think the industry as a whole, it's not a pharma thing, it's more of, as the industry is shifting over and as, even viewership continues to grow and shifts, I think that's where you'll start to see more and more growth, and why it's taking some time. More questions? Anyone? Well, we will be around. Thank you.